the past 3 seasons, Notre Dame has compiled a 33-6 record, including a college football playoff appearance. But the Fighting Irish have been unable to win the big games. Can that change in 2020? Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, the best kept secret in all of college football. Today, bringing you our 2020 Notre Dame Fighting Irish college football predictions. As always, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share these videos. And also check out everything down in our description below, where you can get exclusive content over on our website, thegridironexpert.com, as well as follow us on our social media pages over on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So when you look at Notre Dame over the past few years, guys, many teams would love to have that 33-6 record. Many teams would love to have that. And I would say that Brian Kelly has done a pretty dang good job down in South Bend. But for Fighting Irish faithful, it is frustrating knowing they've been so close to really breaking through, to really making the playoff consistently, to maybe making the national championship game. But they continue to fall just short. 2017, they were playoff contenders before the blowout loss at Miami. 2018, they went undefeated and made the playoff, but were annihilated by Clemson in that semifinal game. And then last year in 2019, despite an early season loss to Georgia, where the Fighting Irish only lost by 6 down in Athens, they were still playoff contenders midway through the season before that 45-14 loss to Michigan. So they've come so close, but they've been unable to get back to the playoff. They've been unable to get to a national championship. They've been unable to win the New Year's 6 bowl games when they get to one. Can that change in 2020? I believe they certainly have the team to do just that, but it all starts with their quarterback in Ian Book. Book is going to be leading an offense that returns 7 starters, and he is one of the best returning quarterbacks in all of college football. Surprised a lot of people by deciding to return back to South Bend. He threw for over 3,000 yards, 34 touchdowns, and just 6 interceptions in 2019. And he is lucky to have a very strong offensive line backing him up and opening up holes for their running back in Jafar Armstrong. The major key for Notre Dame, though, is not necessarily Ian Book and how well he plays, but also how well they adapt to Tommy Rees as the new offensive coordinator. Yes, we know he kind of called the shots in that bowl win over Iowa State, but now he's got a full season ahead of him, and it's a big one. Rees also playing quarterback for the Fighting Irish from 2010 to 2013, but also how well Book builds chemistry with his new pass catchers, as he loses his top 3 from last year, including Chase Claypool, Cole Kmet, and Chris Fink. So that's the key for Notre Dame. I think midway through the season, maybe after a few games, they'll be able to build that chemistry fairly quickly. But you might see some growing pains early within that wide receiver core. Defensively, we know Notre Dame's going to be strong yet again. When you've got Clark Lee as your defensive coordinator, you're looking pretty dang good. Fighting Irish only allowed 17.9 points per game last year. They returned 5 starters from that side of the ball. Yes, there are some key pieces to fill across the board, defensive line, linebacking core, and in the secondary. But Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah led the team with 5.5 sacks last year, or had 5.5 sacks last year. He will be leading the linebacking core for Notre Dame this season. And then you've got Sean Crawford and Kyle Hamilton leading what I believe is a very underrated secondary. Notre Dame led, or was number 2 in the nation last year when it came to turnovers forced per game, forcing over 2 turnovers per game last year, most of those being fumbles as well. So watch out for this Notre Dame defense, guys. They're very underrated. Everybody's focused on that offense, but Brian Kelly's defense is one that many people do not need to be messing with. We take a look at their schedule here. Every year, Notre Dame is criticized for their schedule. They're an independent. They don't play anybody. They should join a conference. If they go undefeated, they still shouldn't make the playoffs because they don't play anybody. Look at the schedule this year and tell me that it's easy, because it's not. Dates against Clemson, Louisville, USC, road game against Pittsburgh, Wisconsin in Green Bay, on the road against Navy, Arkansas, the SEC. It's not easy, guys. This is a very good schedule, which could bolster Notre Dame's strength of schedule if they are, in fact, in playoff discussion. They kick off 2020 with a road game against Navy. Game will not be played in Ireland anymore. It was originally scheduled for week 0 in Ireland, but of course because of COVID, that was rescheduled to now September 5th at Navy. For the first time in 94 games, the game will be played at Navy. Not in South Bend, not at a neutral site, but a true home game for the midshipmen. Last year, Notre Dame defeated them 52-20. And Notre Dame's one of those teams that defensively, they don't struggle too much with the option. They don't struggle too much in terms of slowing down Navy's offense. They do a very good job of containing it and scoring points themselves. And with Navy losing their star QB, Malcolm Perry, and having some questions in the secondary, I don't really see Notre Dame being able to lose this game. I don't see Navy being able to win this game despite emotions riding high, despite it being an historic occasion. I think the midshipmen drop this one, and Notre Dame starts off 1-0. They return home to take on Arkansas. This is an intriguing matchup, guys, because if you know anything about Arkansas, you know they are 4-20 over the past 2 seasons. They are winless in the SEC over the past 2 seasons and now have a brand new head coach in Sam Pittman. But we know that Pittman's done a very good job recruiting, and he has a decent amount of talent this year. Transfer quarterback Felipe Franks from Florida. They have Rakeem Boyd, one of the best running backs in the SEC. A very underrated wide receiver core. Very underrated coordinators in Kendall Briles as offensive coordinator and Barry Odom as defensive coordinator. This game right here, guys, reminds me a lot of Notre Dame's matchup against Vanderbilt in 2018. They were facing off at home against an SEC cellar dweller. Many expected the Fighting Irish to blow them out of the water. And Vanderbilt nearly won that game, only losing 22-17, a game that came down to the final seconds. Do not be surprised if this Arkansas game is similar to that, but in the end, the Razorbacks still have a very long ways to go before they can get to this type of level. It's close in South Bend, but Notre Dame gets the win, taking down the Razorbacks, and we think they take down Western Michigan as well. They're 3-0 going into their game against Wake Forest in Charlotte. You look at Wake Forest, guys, this is going to be a good team. Dave Clawson leads them yet again, and we expect some big things out of them in 2020. Yes, they lose Jamie Newman to Georgia. We know that. Yes, they lose a lot of pieces offensively. But they return 9 starters defensively. And they return Sam Hartman at quarterback and Sage Surratt, one of the best wide receivers in the ACC. So this is certainly a game that Notre Dame cannot afford to overlook, and they certainly can't afford to overlook defensively. Because I think despite the losses offensively, Wake Forest can still put up some big-time points this year. It's practically a road game for the Fighting Irish. They say it's a neutral site in Charlotte. Don't really buy it. But regardless, Notre Dame will get the win here. I think Ian Book, by this point, has built some chemistry with his receivers. The offense is gelling. They're 4-0 going into a huge showdown against Wisconsin. This is really, when you look at it, probably the biggest test that Notre Dame will have faced so far. Navy, of course, not going to be easy. Wake Forest, not going to be that easy. But Wisconsin, by far better than all the 4 teams that Notre Dame would have defeated prior to this. And this game's going to be in Green Bay. How about that? Up at Lambeau Field. So a perfect location, perfect atmosphere between 2 historic teams and 2 teams that are just going to play some smash-mouth football, guys. This is going to be a very, very physical game up at Lambeau Field. You've got a Wisconsin team that returns 9 starters defensively. We know they lose Jonathan Taylor, which is huge. Which means they're going to have to find another guy to be their workhorse in the backfield. But I like the defensive battle here. I like Notre Dame's defense versus Wisconsin's defense. I love the quarterback battle between Jack Cohn, who I think takes a bigger step forward this year in his second full year as a starter, versus Ian Book, as we all know, one of the better QBs in college football. So this is going to come down to really who has the slightest edge offensively. I don't expect many points to be scored in this game because of how strong these defenses are. But when you look at it, when you really look at it, Notre Dame, despite the losses at the wide receiver position, despite the losses in the pass-catching position, Notre Dame has the slight advantage offensively. They really do. They have the slight advantage offensively. So even though this is almost a true road game, Notre Dame's still traveling up to Wisconsin. They do defeat the Wisconsin Badgers, and they are 5-0. And at this point, I would have the Fighting Irish in my top 5 right now. With a 5-0 record with wins like that, especially this win against Wisconsin, they're in my top 5, 5-0. They come back home to face off against Stanford, a team they defeated 45-24 last year. Expect this game to be a little bit closer this year if Stanford is fully healthy. That's the key. David Shaw's team do not go 4-8 regularly, guys. That does not happen. Stanford was beat up horribly last year. We're just ravaged by injuries, and that's a major reason for their downfall in 2019. I think they bounced back this year. They got 9 returning starters offensively, led by Davis Mills, who did very well, all things considered, in 2019. Their secondary is extremely strong, and you should see Stanford get back to the postseason. This game was out west in California. I might be leading the Cardinal way, but it's in South Bend. Notre Dame gets the win. I don't care if fans are there or not. 6-0. Road game against Pittsburgh. This is a huge, huge trap game for Notre Dame, guys. This is one that I think a lot of people have marked down as a loss for Notre Dame. And I'm saying no. I'm saying I'm not buying into that trap right now. I am giving Notre Dame the win. We know it's a trap game because Pittsburgh's coming off a bye week. We know they get the game at home. We know that their defensive line, their pass rush, will be one of the best in the country. They nearly averaged 4 sacks per game in 2019. So Pittsburgh's defense is very, very stout, very good. But who has the quarterback advantage in this one? It's Notre Dame. Kenny Pickett's got to take a major step forward in 2020. He had 13 touchdowns and just 9 interceptions in 2019. That's not very good, guys. That ratio, not good. And that's not going to win you games against the top dogs. Notre Dame certainly is that. So what I believe to be an absolute slugfest, this is a game that I think is similar to Wisconsin. 2 strong defenses. Who has a slight edge offensively? And it's the Fighting Irish. So boom, they are undefeated going into their bye week. And we're going to give them a win over Duke. Certainly not a game that Notre Dame can overlook, especially with the addition of Chase Bryce with David Cutcliffe. But I'm not too worried about this game for Notre Dame, considering they defeated the Blue Devils 38-7 last year. Only thing Duke could have in this one that's going for them is at Clemson's the very next week, November 7th. Maybe Notre Dame overlooks them, but I highly doubt it. So here we go, November 7th, the biggest game on Notre Dame's schedule by far, guys. This is what we are talking about. Beginning of the video, we mentioned Notre Dame has been unable to win the big games. Brian Kelly has been unable to win the big games. This is their chance to do just that. This is their chance to get that signature win. And if they win this, they might run the table, go undefeated, and boom, they're in the playoff. They're back after missing out last year. We know Clemson is going to be the best team in the country, at least arguably. We know they have a little bit of a history. They last met in the 2018 college football playoff. Clemson annihilated them in that game, 30-3. They also met back in 2015 in Death Valley, where Notre Dame fell just 24-22, an absolute thriller. Expect this 2020 matchup to be very similar to the matchup we saw back in 2015. I expect this game to be decided by no more than 10 points. It's going to be decided by 10 points or less, but it will be in favor of the Clemson Tigers. Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Amari Rodgers, a very strong defensive line. Brent Venables as their defensive coordinator. This is probably going to be Clemson's toughest test all season long, and if the Tigers are going to lose a game, it's probably going to come right here in South Bend. But I just don't think the Fighting Irish have enough to get the job done. I don't know if anybody has enough to get the job done against Dabo Swinney's Tigers. They fall to Clemson for their first loss of the season. But if this game is close, guys, their playoff hopes are not dashed, and we'll touch on that in a second. I think they bounce back with a road win against Georgia Tech. Jeff Collins is still going through a major rebuild down in Atlanta. This offense averaged less than 17 points per game. So hopefully Notre Dame's not too hungover after this, and I don't think they will be because their hopes of the playoffs are not dashed. They defeat Georgia Tech, and they will defeat Louisville, a game that will certainly test the Fighting Irish defense, as Louisville has a lot of speed and a lot of talent returning from that offense that averaged over 30 points per game last year. Notre Dame did defeat them 35-17 on the road last year. I think they get the job done at home this year. They are 10-1 going into what I meant to put as a road game at USC. It is a road game at USC. And last year in South Bend, Notre Dame won that game 30-27. I think it was a little bit closer than people expected. Notre Dame was in control for the majority of the game, but USC made it close and scared them a little bit towards the end. And when you look at this USC team, guys, we know that Clay Helton is fighting for his job. Maybe he's gone by this point if USC doesn't meet expectations earlier in the season, but I don't think that's going to happen with all the talent that USC has coming back for them. all the talent they have coming back. They have Keaton Slovis back at quarterback, arguably one of the better quarterbacks and more accurate quarterbacks in the country this season. The Trojans average 32.5 points per game, and he returns two of his greatest wide receivers in Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tyler Vaughn. Their defense returns 10 starters from last year. That's where USC has to improve. We know they can score points. Can their defense take a step forward? And with it being at the Coliseum, with it being out west, I think they do take a step forward. I think they do upset the Fighting Irish. I think this is a game where Notre Dame's defense kind of collapses a little bit. I think you start to see, even though it's the last game of the season, I think you start to see some weaknesses in those shoes we said that had to be filled. Keaton Slovis has a big day through the air. USC gets a huge win, maybe a job-saving win for Clay Helton. And we have Notre Dame winning 10-2. Again, that USC game on the road. We'll just pencil that in here at USC. So you look at this, guys. We have Notre Dame going 10-2. Many teams would kill for that type of record. Many Fighting Irish fans now, I know, would not. This is still probably good enough to get to a New Year's Six bowl game. Maybe they win that going 11-2 for the second year in a row. But I will say this, guys. One scenario you have to look out for. We know that with this schedule, if Notre Dame goes undefeated, they are in the college football playoff. Without a doubt, undisputed, they're in. If Notre Dame just wins one of the two losses we have here, if they defeat USC or they defeat Clemson, they just win one, they still have a very good shot at making the playoff, and here's why. Say they beat Clemson, the losses to USC. They still have a win against Clemson on their resume. Yes, they don't have a conference championship game. We know that. They're independent. That could hurt their cause. But you have a win against Clemson. You have a neutral site win against a good Wisconsin team who might make the Big Ten championship game. You have a road win against Navy. You have a win over an SEC team. You have a win over a potential 8-win Pittsburgh team. The resume is boosting there. If the loss is to Clemson, and it's relatively close by, say, 7 points or less, and you're 11-1, your only loss is to a Clemson team who probably will go undefeated, they have a very good chance of getting into the playoff as well. So undefeated or 11-1 does not keep the Fighting Irish out of playoff contention, but 10-2 does. And once again, Brian Kelly and the Fighting Irish will have failed to win the games that matter the most. A still very successful season by many. Many will view it as that. But you can't help but wonder, with this type of talent that they've had over these past few years, you can't help but wonder what could have been in South Bend. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share these videos. And check out everything down in our description below. Exclusive content on our website, thegridironexpert.com, as well as our social media pages over on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Constant updates over there that you do not want to miss. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.